Deep within the roots of the great oak lived a small fox named Pip. He loved the smell of morning dew and the taste of sweet berries, but there was one thing he did not love at all. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Pip would scurry inside and bolt his door tight. To Pip, the night was a giant velvet curtain that hid things he didn't want to see. Pip's best friend was a cheerful bunny named Bramble. They spent every sunny afternoon playing tag through the clover and counting the clouds in the sky. Bramble was brave and fast, always leading the way to the best hiding spots. When they were together, Pip felt like he could do anything as long as the sun was still shining. One evening, a chilly wind blew through the forest, and the shadows grew long and spindly. Pip watched from his window as the trees turned into dark giants with reaching arms. He pulled his fluffy tail around his nose and shivered, wishing the morning would come sooner. The night felt far too big for a fox as small as him. The next morning, Pip went to Bramble's burrow, but his friend didn't come out to play. Inside, Bramble lay tucked under a heavy quilt of dried leaves, his nose pink and his ears drooping. He let out a tiny, wet sneeze that made his whole body shake. Bramble had caught a terrible shiver cold, and he was too weak to even nibble a carrot. Bramble's mother, a kind rabbit named Fern, sighed as she placed a cool leaf on Bramble's forehead. She told Pip that the only cure for such a deep cold was the starbloom, a flower that glowed like a fallen star. "But it only opens at midnight," Fern said softly, looking toward the dark forest. "And it only grows in the heart of the whispering woods." Pip looked out the window at the dense, dark tree line of the whispering woods. His tummy did a nervous flip-flop at the thought of going there after the sun went down. He knew Bramble needed the starbloom to feel better, but the dark felt so cold and scary. He sat by his friend's side, watching Bramble struggle to stay awake. As the stars began to twinkle, Pip knew he couldn't wait any longer. He found a small leaf bag and packed it with some crunchy acorns and a sturdy walking stick. He took a deep breath, puffed out his chest, and stepped out into the twilight. "I'm doing this for Bramble," he whispered to himself, his voice trembling just a little. The entrance to the whispering woods felt like stepping into another world. The air was cool, and the trees seemed to lean in close to watch him pass. Every time a twig snapped, Pip jumped nearly a foot into the air. He gripped his walking stick tightly, his eyes searching the darkness for any sign of a glow. Suddenly, a pair of huge, glowing yellow eyes appeared in a bush right in front of him. Pip let out a squeak and hid behind a large rock, certain he had found a monster. But when he peeked out, he realized it was just a funny-shaped bush with 2 yellow flowers caught in the branches. He let out a shaky laugh, feeling a little bit braver than before. "Are you lost, little fox?" a tiny, buzzing voice asked from above. A small firefly named Flicker drifted down, landing softly on the tip of Pip's nose. Flicker's tail pulsed with a warm, steady light that chased away the deepest shadows. Pip smiled, feeling the heavy weight of the dark lift just a little bit. Flicker agreed to help Pip find the heart of the woods where the starbloom grew. Together, they trekked deeper into the forest, past bubbling brooks and sleeping ferns. Pip noticed that with Flicker's light, the trees didn't look like monsters anymore. They looked like old friends standing guard. The night wasn't empty. It was full of life and soft sounds. Suddenly, a mischievous gust of wind swept through the clearing, swirling leaves into the air. Flicker spun around in the breeze, trying to stay steady, but he was carried high up into the canopy. "Flicker!" Pip cried out, reaching up, but his tiny friend was gone. Once again, Pip was standing in the pitch-black center of the woods. Pip froze, his heart drumming against his ribs like a trapped bird. The silence of the woods felt heavy and cold without Flicker's cheerful glow. He wanted to turn back and run all the way home to his warm bed. But then he remembered Bramble's sad, sick face and the sound of his tiny sneeze. "I can be brave for Bramble," Pip whispered, opening his eyes. He didn't see a monster. He saw a tiny, flickering blue light far in the distance, past a steep rocky hill. It wasn't Flicker, and it wasn't a flower. It was a sign. Pip stood up, wiped a tear from his cheek, and started to move toward the light. The path grew steep, and the rocks were slippery with evening dew. Pip had to use his paws and his walking stick to scramble up the side of a mossy ledge. His legs were tired, and his fur was dusty, but he didn't stop. He focused on the blue glow, which grew brighter and more beautiful with every step he took. At the very top of the hill, Pip found it. Nestled in a bed of silver grass was a single, magnificent flower with petals like shards of sapphire. It pulsed with a rhythmic light, casting a shimmering glow over the entire hilltop. The star bloom was more beautiful than any sunset Pip had ever seen. Pip carefully plucked the flower, making sure to keep its long, glowing stem intact. As soon as he held it, he felt a strange warmth spread through his paws. The darkness didn't feel scary anymore because he was carrying a piece of the stars with him. He began his journey back, his heart feeling lighter than a dandelion seed. As Pip reached the edge of the woods, the first light of dawn was beginning to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. He ran all the way to Bramble's burrow, his little legs moving as fast as they could. He burst through the door just as Fern was waking up, holding the glowing flower high. Fern brewed a tea from the star bloom's petals, and the room filled with the scent of honey and night air. Bramble took a few sips, and almost instantly his eyes brightened and his nose stopped being pink. He sat up and gave Pip a giant fuzzy hug. "You went into the dark for me?" Bramble asked in amazement. Pip realized that the dark wasn't something to be feared, but a place where the most beautiful things grow. He had found his bravery not because he wasn't scared, but because he cared for his friend more than his fear. From that night on, whenever the sun went down, Pip and Bramble would sit together and watch the stars.